Oh, congratulations. That's a good move. But I'll let him take it away.
Thank you. So my name is Garth Davis, and I'm co-founder of a company called Spoonflower, which is a digital textile printing operation, essentially a website that allows you to print fabric. It's also a marketplace for fabric, and it's a digital manufacturer, so we're printing everything digitally, and unlike, I think, the broader story of textiles, we've doubled each year for the last 3. Yeah, I think people are enjoying the service. The topic today is really about how the arts and manufacturing are reintegrating. And what I'd like to do is perhaps have each of my panelists introduce themselves, and then we'll jump right in. Orin, Kim.
Thank you, Art. Good afternoon. My name is Orin Ginn. I run a little design firm here in Raleigh called Ginn Design, and I graduated from the industrial design program back in '91. And over the last 20 years have worked in, both in consulting, and I also worked for a large structural foam molder in Fort Wayne, Indiana. And so I've seen the business of product development and manufacturing from both sides. And over the years, I've developed a certain amount of expertise as well as a real passion for design for manufacturing, particularly as it pertains to the contributions that industrial designers make to product development. And so I've been evangelizing and have been educating students as well as professionals about the value of understanding about materials, manufacturing, and more importantly, how to work with the other constituents of the manufacturing business, whether it's engineers, material suppliers, molders. And I'm now back at the College of Design 20 years later, earning my master's degree in ID, but also help teaching materials and processes to this current generation of industrial designers.
Terry.
My name is Terry Helminger Radcliffe. I am the Executive Director of the Industrial Extension Service here at NC State University. We are the engineering extension for NC State. What that means, particularly to this topic, is that we work with Co-op Extension works with farmers throughout the state. We work with business and industry to help them figure out how to innovate across the state, and that means we work with a lot of manufacturers. I graduated from NC State in 1978, December of 1978, with a degree in engineering operations, which is not a degree option anymore, but it was a variant of the industrial engineering curriculum at the time. I was working with a manufacturer when I graduated. I had finished my degree while I started my career, I guess. Right after I graduated, I left the manufacturer and went to work with the local power company at the time, CP&L. And when I went to work with them, to do standard IE work on their production facilities. And that is their power plants. And most importantly at the time was the construction of a lot of the new power plants they had. So I started out walking around with a clipboard doing workflow analysis and motion time studies with construction workers at the Harris Nuclear Power Plant and the Roxborough Power Plants and the hydro power plants. I was not one of the favorite people. I learned real fast that construction workers really don't care that you're an engineer from NC State University. But at any rate, I worked with them for 20 years, and then after a 20-year career with them, I left and came to work for NC State University, my alma mater. What I like about that work, in the meantime, I had gotten my MBA and from Duke University and have a PhD in public administration. what I like about the work here at NC State is that I'm back to my roots. I'm back to working with manufacturers and healthcare, helping them do the same things that I started out helping to do at the power company. And that is help them figure out how to be more efficient and effective with their cost ratios, and how to be more efficient and effective with generating revenues at the top end.
Thank you. Brooke.
Thank you very much. Brooks Rayford, and as Gart said, I'm a CHAS graduate from here at NC State, although it was SHAS in those days, when it was School Hub instead of College Hub. And currently I'm CEO of the North Carolina Technology Association, which is the trade group for the tech sector in North Carolina, so much like a Chamber of Commerce, but focused on the technology community. So our membership is made up of companies and organizations and institutions of all types and sizes. We actually have a couple of entities at NC State that are members, a number of state government agencies are, a number of other universities are, but mostly companies, and about 70% of those are small and medium-sized companies, not just the large brand names you might immediately think of when you hear technology firms, although they're members too. We have about 600 member companies in the state at the moment of ours who employ over 100,000 North Carolinians. They employ many more than that when you count their worldwide footprint in the case of large companies, but 100,000 North Carolinians. So we have pretty broad representation within our membership. We're an open membership organization, so any company can join. We say in our business, technology is pervasive, so if you use technology, which you do if you're alive, we have a membership category for you. So whether you're Coca-Cola bottling, or Burt's Bees, or Wells Fargo, or the new iteration of CP&L / Progress Energy / Duke Energy, these are all members of ours. Straight to go.
Great, thank you. So I have a hypothesis that manufacturing is changing. It's changing radically, and North Carolina is changing around it. That we're almost in a kind of a 1.0 to 2.0 transition in terms of the way manufacturing is done, the pace at which it's done, and the kinds of businesses that are manufacturing in our state. North Carolina, even though it's lost a great deal of its manufacturing base, is still the 4th largest manufacturer in the country. So we are all involved in manufacturing and have been watching this. And I guess I would ask each of you, how has manufacturing changed? Just the sort of this part that's changed most strongly for you in the field of design and engineering and in organizing manufacturers. Why don't we start with you, Orin?
Go ahead. Sure, thanks. Yeah, when I got out of school in '91, there was definitely a trend afoot, and over the late '90s and the 2000s, there was definitely a move, as we've seen, particularly in textiles and in the furniture industry, but really industry-wide. When you're developing a product, a lot of my clients would kind of make the automatic assumption, well, where can I take this offshore so that I can make this inexpensively and make a lot more money than I would by domestically manufacturing the same product. The reality, though, now is that the pendulum is starting to swing back, and I think some of that has to do with the growth of the middle class in a lot of the countries that we were setting up shop. This overseas or offshore manufacturing isn't always the panacea that I think a lot of clients, a lot of manufacturers think it's going to be, and we have seen articles in Fortune and Inc. about medium-sized companies, ones that can't own their own manufacturing overseas, really reconsidering the wisdom of that and bringing a lot of their products back, even if it means a slight increase in piece price. What they're finding is that when they factor in the logistics of maybe culture, the timing, the fact that their product often will be on a boat for 30 days, logistical issues, quality issues, they really found that the sum total of benefit really isn't what they thought it was. And then there is also a desire on the part of the consumer to look for products that are domestically manufactured. There's a certain amount of control that I think manufacturers like to have, that I found them asking for, where can I have this done domestically? So the good news is that it is coming back, and like he said, the manufacturing here, this is a very attractive area to do manufacturing. I still think there's a huge amount of capacity here in North Carolina. Some of the counties have been reaching out, like Pitt County, to say, hey, set up shop in eastern North Carolina. So the good news is that I think it is moving back that way, and it is not as much of an automatic that, oh, we're going to manufacture in Asia as it used to be. So that's why I'm teaching designers about materials and processes, so that they can advise their clients about the opportunities that are domestic, as opposed to just going ahead and following along whatever people are saying to do, is just to just assume it's being made overseas.
So basically, your leading change is offshoring and now reshoring.
Right, there is an opportunity for designers. I mean, a lot of these product concepts start with design, and eventually, obviously, get engineering and manufacturing involved, but I think there's an opportunity for those who understand the manufacturing business is to plant the seed with their clients, or if they're an in-house designer and they're part of the design product development staff, is to say, look, let's consider the opportunities that are here domestically, what that allows us to do, whether it's a timing issue, a quality issue, just a marketing issue, because again, the consumers are more sensitive to that. There are times when strategically it makes sense to domestically manufacture, and there, in the time when a lot of the stuff has gone offshore, the companies that have been remain standing have optimized their processes. So there wasn't, not the disparity that people used to associate with the difference between Asian manufacturing, or I say Asian, but really any offshore manufacturing and domestic manufacturing. When you factor in logistics issues, cultural issues, information transfer, IT security, there's a huge host of rationales that drive people back here. And I think you, as a designer, and I've been teaching the students this, can help facilitate that, and with engineers to reinforce that notion that domestic manufacturing is definitely a viable option.
All right, same question, Terry.
So when I graduated in the dark ages, manufacturing was very vital, both in North Carolina, and you're right, Garth, we still are a very vital manufacturing plant, a manufacturing state. Manufacturing, despite the fact that we've lost a lot of jobs, is still the #1 gross state product developer for North Carolina. And I think that is not uncommon for the Southeast, and for that matter, as far up as Pennsylvania. But manufacturing is getting revitalized in this country, and North Carolina, fortunately, is poised to be a big player in that. I agree with your remarks that a lot of it is reshoring, but I'll say I think that phrase is not quite right, because I think that there are a lot of companies. Caterpillar, for example, was doing a lot of they did a lot of offshoring. They're not moving their plants back. They're keeping their plants overseas, and they're establishing new plants back here in North Carolina, because they're finding that, as is the case in your example, as is the case with so many companies, they're finding that the best equation is try to find a way to manufacture closest to your market, to avoid some of those logistics.
Right.
So worldwide companies are truly becoming worldwide, and that no longer means making a choice of manufacturing here or overseas. It means providing manufacturing all over the world. I would say that is probably, I'm going to get to the point of the question, that is probably the biggest change from when I was graduating from NC State, considering a manufacturing career.
So if I can summarize, it's reshoring, but for the purposes of manufacturing to a home market.
To a home market.
So less, still global trade, but more manufacturing close to the consumer.
Right, and reshoring facilities, not replacing them from China or Vietnam, but in addition to,
right.
So that they're providing manufacturing closest to their markets. So And I think that the reason for that is because unlike when I was graduating, labor is not the primary focus of cost and how you drive cost out. It used to be that the primary cog in the wheel that made a difference from raw product to finished product was labor. Now, quite honestly, in these days of advanced manufacturing, it's robots or things that they don't call robots, but are, a lot of the stuff is mechanized, and the mechanization is driven by a computer, and the manufacturing worker is not touching the product. They're touching the computer that's controlling the thing that touches the product. So it's really, the equation doesn't shift necessarily all over the world because of where the lowest labor cost is. The equation shifts all over the world because of the markets and what the markets are driving. And I would say that the Gart's company is a great example of what I mean by that. And what I mean by that is, when I was graduating, you were in high cotton if you got a job with Milliken, as an example, as a cadet manager. And for that, you would go to work for them, and they would, for 2 years, they would pick you up by the nape of your neck every 6 to 8 weeks and send you to another part of the country so you could learn another facet of the textile value chain, manufacturing value chain. Now, it really, and by the way, that was all, it was dyeing here and printing there and spinning over here. So they take this raw product, and they would take the raw product and move it from one place to the next to have the next part of the process done to it. And all of those were specialty plants. Well, now we've got companies like Gart's that really, well, your customers design their own, and then somehow in the background it's manufactured and provided to them. So, that's really, when I say moving to the market where it's being demanded, that is a huge difference. It is a huge difference on all kinds of decisions, and includes real important factors like industrial design. It includes real important factors like bringing the arts back into the picture.
That's great. Go ahead.
Sure, thanks. Terry, I hit on a number of things that I would add to. First, you acknowledged and noted there toward the end about the important role of IT in manufacturing because of the role it plays in how mechanized everything is. That's certainly true. In our association, we have a lot of what most people would consider to be traditional IT companies that make up our membership, but increasingly a number of advanced manufacturing-oriented companies or companies engaged in that. Because of those very reasons, it requires a good bit of technology and information technology to do what you do and to manufacture, to engage your customers, whatever you're doing. As part of your business, IT is playing a central role, and it's increasingly integrated. Terry also mentioned the notion of not just resourcing, but actually adding capacity, really trying to manufacture where your customers are, where your market is. But to the extent that companies did outsource, and the value that they found in that was primarily economic, which was a lot of cheap, talented and cheap labor, available labor, and so on. There's, values play a role here too. So if a company decides that green is important to them, that was mentioned in the last panel, I think came in toward the end of that, then you might decide that the shipping across the ocean, even shipping across the state, is not something you want to do because you're contributing to degrading the environment in ways you'd rather not. So if you can source locally for your supplies and then do the manufacturing locally, that's an important value. So values can sometimes trump economics or drive economics. That's one factor I would throw in there. Another is, again, picking up on Terry's wisdom, the unemployment rate in North Carolina has been persistently high, stubbornly high. According to Michael Walden, who's an NC State professor and a widely quoted economist, he calculates that the North Carolina unemployment rate is 2 full percentage points higher than it would be if the manufacturing percentage of our economy was normed to the rest of the country. So to get back to the initial question about how has manufacturing changed for you, well, I'm a CHAS graduate, but focused heavily on manufacturing when I was a student, or thinking about careers. But at that time, I don't think even people who were in those fields thought of manufacturing as a futuristic next wave, it's where it's at kind of profession, whereas now you do because of what's involved in it and the skills that are required and the professional opportunities and companies that can be started and so forth. And you don't have to go to Milliken. You can. There are companies like that, but you can do a lot of other things. So because we have this history of traditional manufacturing that still accounts for a lot of the unemployment in North Carolina, as that begins to cycle through and we start to see more of the manufacturing be of the type you're discussing today, I think you'll see our employment metrics and other things also start to level out and mirror other countries.
So, you know, I get technology and the changing values and the application of green values to the supply chain is all things that are new. I'm going to answer my own question as well because as Diane knows, who recruited me to be here today, I'm absolutely passionate about entrepreneurship in manufacturing, and I'm going to throw 3 more things on the pile here. One is speed, and when I say speed, from your idea to building a prototype to getting it into short-run manufacturing form. The second is cost. I think there are a lot of factors that are driving down the expense of setting up a manufacturing line, and as a guy who's set up a manufacturing line in the last little while here, it's possible without being Steve Jobs or having you know, Bob Young's money to do it yourself. And the third is the degree of integration. When I say integration, I mean design skills applied to material skills, applied to supply chain skills, applied to industrial engineering skills that you can kind of bring together in a startup, and you can apply all those things and see your work you know, from the design stage all the way through to manufacturing. I don't know if Ali is still here, but he and I are collaborating on a pair of shoes. There's a possibility that we'll be building shoes in Raleigh, North Carolina, the same way that Raleigh Denim is building jeans. Yeah, speed, low barriers to entry, and technology, and all of that, you know, is evidenced by people launching businesses on Kickstarter and that sort of thing. So I'll ask one more question, and then we'll throw this open to the floor. Let's say, I mean, we're speaking with students here today. These changes are happening, and they have to apply themselves to thinking about what their role might be in manufacturing, what their future could be. What would you advise them?
Can I start with the answer to that question?
Please.
Because I want to build on something that you said, Gard.
Okay.
To me, if you are anywhere close to graduating, you've been through this university and have taken a lot of different courses. All of them probably, I hope all of them have seemed interesting, and maybe you're a little bit sad that you have to kind of peg yourself in just industrial engineering or just industrial design or just CHAS. You know, all these things maybe might have some interest for you. One of the neat things about going into manufacturing now is exactly what Gard said. It is you're coming into the workforce of manufacturing with the ability to apply your skills, your critical thinking skills, across a lot of different disciplines. And that's what's going to make manufacturing employers interested in you, is your ability to apply your thinking skills across a lot of different disciplines and bring all of, and and synthesize all of those things that you've learned up to now, and synthesize all those things you're going to learn about these various disciplines into something that's workable. And then do it over again, and do it over again faster. So I think that that's probably, to me, it would be exciting if I was sitting in your chair, that you don't have to, you can play across all those interests that might have cropped up while you were in school. That wasn't necessarily true in my day.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, well, one of the messages that we try to impart to the industrial design students, and something that I've definitely seen in my own practice, is that the successful designers in this business have kind of been able to wear multiple hats and been really true Renaissance people. Part of that is out of necessity. Some of it is what's core to at least the way that we approach design education is a capacity for empathy, and that extends beyond the user. The kind of the most obvious focus of empathy is our end user and making sure the user experience that we're creating for the products is appropriate and valuable. But I'm also encouraging them to look at themselves as part of a broader community of, within the manufacturing community. Having worked in manufacturing back in the 90s, I saw kind of an absence of a presence of design at the Society of Plastics Industry conferences, where I would be rubbing elbows with material suppliers and manufacturers. These days, you're seeing people take a more entrepreneurial approach to design and really getting involved in and reaching out to people in engineering and in business and in materials and manufacturing. And the good news is that within this program, especially if you're a graduate student, we have a product in an innovation lab here that is really a collaborative effort between the College of Design, the School of Business, and also the engineering school to really get these different communities and these cultures to intermingle early on and understand the language differences, what pain points, what their agendas are, what is driving a person in business versus somebody who's an engineer or manufacturer versus a designer, and have them understand each other so that there really is true collaboration and that we're really moving the ball in the right direction. And too often back when I was getting out of school was it more seen as an adversarial type of relationship and a territorial issue, and that really isn't, it's not relevant, it's not productive, and it really isn't the case now. Again, you see designers going out and designing and engineering their own products and working with people in manufacturing directly, and that is something I'm encouraging my students to see themselves as part of a bigger community as opposed to here and pushing pretty pictures off to a whole other community.
Integration.
Absolutely.
I'll pick up a little bit on that theme of integration. I've got a few of my notes into this one answer, so bear with me if I ramble a minute. Dean Braden of the College of Humanities and Social Sciences was quoted in an article that followed the editorial that led to this session today in many ways, and saying that it's important to note that all commerce takes place in a social and cultural context. So a number of things we talked about today sort of emphasize that point. We were talking about values like green and how a desire to go green may impact the way business is done, where it's done, and how it's done. Similarly, the shrinking wage gap in some foreign countries is another factor that makes it less financially beneficial to do the offshoring we were talking about before. That societal change has great impact, obviously, on the discussion that we're having, what your professional opportunities might be, and whether or not that's an upward or downward trend in terms of opportunity here. I want to give you 2 quotes from NC State leaders, if I get that back, caught fast right now, that actually tie into this. One that I just got today by an email, the other one that I heard in the panel I moderated that included Chancellor Woodson, and I'll start with Chancellor Woodson. He made an observation that this was a STEM conference, not a STEAM conference or a STEAMD conference, but a STEM conference, where he observed that at NC State anyway, their data showed that students whose math, let me rephrase that, the greater a student's math proficiency, the better they did regardless of major, across the university, not just within technical fields. That's an interesting thing. Yeah. Now the quote is today. There's a chemistry professor here at NC State who's on the school board in Wake County, and I'm involved with the school board on some things, and so in an email exchange I was in, he made the observation that his best chemistry students are almost invariably involved in arts, design, music, etc. Very interesting couple of quotes from two very technical people whose background comes from the technical arena, but who are leaders in a university setting where students come from across the spectrum, and I think those are worth noting. So if the question is what would I say to a student who's graduating versus choosing a career major at the front end, I would say that a number of the skills and the trainings or the traits that you gain through a more task-oriented education, but certainly blended within your own collaboration, leadership, communication, the ability to synthesize information, carry it over, to distill information in a way that can then be communicated well out in a practical, meaningful way to non-techies, not just yourselves. There are people like Terry who I've had the pleasure of knowing for a number of years who seem to have been born to be leaders, but there are also people who have to learn it. And to the extent that you stand out in your own work group, every society is nothing but groups. Your family unit is the smallest of those, and you go up from there. Whether it's a club on campus, your work team at work, the company as a whole, the church community you're in, whatever that may be, you're going to have people within that little unit step up as a manager, a senior manager, and then a director, and then a senior director, and eventually executive director or CEO of a company, founder of a company, running a tech association when you're not a techie. How about that for a story? So guess who's going to get that opportunity? It won't be the person who doesn't exhibit skills in areas we just talked about. It will be the people who do, because they'll stand out and stand up. They'll probably be inclined to even lean forward, to use a recent phrase. So I would just say that as you go into careers that are predominantly in the technical side of things, that one of the key ways to stand out and be a leader and a chancellor of a university or whatever you may want to be in between is to keep in mind those kinds of talents and traits you may have either picked up, been born with, or have learned through your school.
If you guys are familiar with a very, very large design firm called IDEO, Tim Brown has written a number of very good books about design thinking, but one of the earlier books that he put out coined a term that I think is very relevant, and he referred to the successful designers, but this applied to any of his employees, as what he used to call T-shaped people. And what he meant by that is, you think of the letter T, the vertical is the core competency, whether you're an engineer, designer, or in business or manufacturing. But the outstretched right and left element of the T suggests at least a competency and an awareness of some of the other disciplines that you'll be engaging with. And those are the people that really are very effective in translating from one language to another. And I mean it quite literally. When I'm a designer, I have to convert my design speak into engineering speak and manufacturing speak. Those ability to reach out and to understand the needs of those partners really makes you an effective team member. And so that idea of T-shaped people, that doesn't end us at school. That's an ongoing thing. You're constantly looking at a way of understanding these other team members. That's very critical in this business.
So I'm going to take a minute and answer my question again. If I was talking to a student right now, I would say, going back to your question about your point about math, right? Somebody who's good at math is. I wonder if there's anybody who's done a test of social media. How many friends you have on Facebook is, and how that correlates. Because I think it does. You never thought all the time you spent on Facebook would actually be valuable. But Spoonflower gets 100% of its business through social media. We don't advertise. We advertise just a little bit on our own name so that people who search for us can find us. But all discovery happens through social media. I would also say, no matter what your discipline is, learn to code. There's almost, I see, I'm a mentor with the Venture Mentoring Service that's supplied by Council for Entrepreneurial Development. And I'll see 20 or 30 applications come through for that service with 4 or 5 co-founders, and their intention is to create a mobile app, and they don't have a single member who codes. It's not going to be a good mobile app, I can guarantee. So learn to code, no matter where you're going, even if you're in the liberal arts, learn to code. The third thing I would say is 3D modeling. You know, Blender is a very, very cool tool. It's free. It's not that hard to learn. And I would encourage anybody who's thinking about manufacturing, it's going to be one of these things like code that 30 years from now is still going to be useful. And the last thing I would say is there's probably never been a better time, if you're the kind of person who uses tools, to be good with tools. You know, we are modifying, making our own printers, and I can tell the difference between somebody who's you know, good with code and somebody who's good with code and also good with their hands. So those have been really, really key. We try to evolve our business in very short cycles, and those are all skills that feed into its success. Okay, so I warned you I was going to throw this open to questions, and now is the moment. Please. Yes, Megan?
Megan, yes.
Yeah.
So I know when I was an undergrad and I thought about a manufacturing job, I really didn't know what that meant. I thought about, you know, from that very first speech, I don't know how many of you saw it, you know, somebody taking the hot iron and moving it from one place to the next, and that's what manufacturing was. It was that person that screws the top on the toothpaste, and that's a terrible thing to do. But now working in manufacturing, I see that manufacturing jobs really aren't just the people on the floor. People on the floor seem to be getting smarter and working with people with master's degrees that are operating our bioreactors. You know, they're much more educated, but as a student, I would have loved for somebody to sit me down and say, what is a manufacturing job? What kind of things do they do? Could you guys elaborate on what you think manufacturing is?
I mean, I've told a lot of the IB graduates who are looking for opportunities, whether it's a co-op or their first job, to not discount the notion that their first job might be in manufacturing. For me, it was my second. I went to Atlanta, worked for a small design firm, and then got a headhunter found me because I had some experience in materials and plastics specifically, and moved me out to Fort Wayne to work for a molder. And my job was to be the in-house designer, but really what it turned out that I was kind of an ambassador of sorts between this manufacturer and the design engineering community. So when people came in with an idea, it often was an entrepreneur, the manufacturers had one way of looking at it, but I was trying to see beyond that, to see the opportunities and help kind of foster that opportunity and make it a better fit for both the customer and our company. So and there's a lot to be learned. I've just recently taken my undergraduates to AMET Technologies, which is a molder in Zebulon contract molder, and it really opens their eyes about the people that are affected by design in terms of the things you're asking them to do in terms of manufacturing, put this piece in that piece or assemble this bit. And that, to me, is a huge opportunity. It may or may not be where the designers remain as a career, but I've encouraged all of them to consider that as one component of their work experience.
I think more and more, we talk in technology about it being used to customize a customer's experience. Manufacturing, say this is a non-manufacturer, from what I see, and here is clearly going that way as well. The 3D printing that you mentioned a moment ago, the ability to design a small medical device that fits in just the right way, and do it in a fairly, relatively speaking, inexpensive, local, and immediate sort of way, and then replicate that. That's huge. I mean, that's a big deal. Also, to speak about tools, your answer I thought actually was pretty good. Your examples were a good answer. Started the answer to the next question, which is here are the kinds of skill sets that if you bring these skills to the table, you're going to really have a future in manufacturing. I think students need to hear that when we're even considering what to declare. It's high school they need to hear this earlier, not once they're at state, and certainly once they're here. But the example that comes to my mind is a company in the Piedmont area, Greensboro area, North Carolina, that is doing a great thing, morally and otherwise, by really making a point to go out and try to hire displaced, mostly older textile workers, furniture workers primarily, but textiles too, anyone who's worked in that sort of environment, to work in a clean room on cell phone parts that are having to require very fine motor skills, experience working with your hands in a very steady way, but understanding the mechanics and the science and the math behind all of that, some of which is for those workers was intuitive before, and now students are being heavily trained to do. They're finding that these particular workers are very well aligned with what they need in the clean room. So they're investing in the training, retraining of these workers who have lost the ability to support their families, and that is the kind of manufacturing that everyone always says is not coming back in the way that it was here before, but this new type is. So taking an older person's skill sets who still has lifetime ahead of them to work and retraining them to be very relevant in a very relevant product area is a pretty big deal to that worker, I can tell you, and the company is glad to have the mature, seasoned worker on their hands. So whether you're retraining because you're already in the manufacturing arena and have maybe found your livelihood going away, or you're brand new into all of this and thinking about, is this relevant to me? Is there really a career path here? Can I satisfy a lot of my interests and even stick around some? As several of you mentioned, I think all of those, the answer is more and more clearly yes.
Sorry.
I was gonna say thank you, Megan, for the question. And to me, answering this question is this is the big difference between going to work for manufacturing today versus going to manufacturing 40 years ago. And today, the difference between going to manufacturing and as just about anything else, well, in any part of the manufacturing spectrum and going to work for another business is the difference of the core. What is it they're trying to accomplish? What's the company's objective? The company's objective in manufacturing is that they make things. You can go to work for manufacturing and do everything else. You need marketing folks, you need communications folks, you need finance folks, you need folks that are really good with computers and computer-driven things, and you need engineers and shop floor workers. It used to be that when you went to work for manufacturing, you were going to go out on a shop floor and do something with your hands as part of the making part of it. Now, if you go to work for healthcare, you can go to work in all those fields, and the difference between healthcare and manufacturing is what are you trying to accomplish? And so I would say going to work for manufacturing means that you're going to work for people who turn a raw product into a finished product some way, and you going to work for them means that you're going to influence that in whatever skill sets that you bring to the table.
Yeah, I would say a manufacturer in the context of Spoonflower is a troubleshooter.
Yeah.
Is somebody, I know you're practically a farmer, right? You've got, if I remember, you're working with cells and so forth, and you're coming back on the weekend, et cetera, make sure they're doing well. People at Spoonflower do, they're working in the process and have to be disciplined and focused, but they're also working on the process in an artisanal kind of way. They're working with fussy machines. They're trying to improve the yields. So there's absolutely nothing about this job that's the same from one shift to the next, and they're absolutely integral to how we move the business forward. You were talking about the toothpaste example. I went to Inland Steel, and this will be forever my vision of what manufacturing is like. And I remember going to the front door, the front gate, where 15,000 people went in every day. Safety is our #1 concern, 121 days since the last death. Now, those jobs still exist, and there really are still old school manufacturing jobs like that, but most manufacturing jobs at this point are very much about building the process and improving them.
Gordon, you give me a great idea. I put a sign up at the Technology Association's headquarters office. It's 20 years since the last death. What happened then? 20 years old.
All right. You had a question. Go
I
ahead.
think the whole venue of the repetitiveness of the old manufacturing world, and you checked your brain in when you walked in and you became a robotaton where I wasn't allowed to think and I had to conform. I believe in today's world, everyone who undertakes a job of any kind must become a translator, a communicator, and a problem solver. And I don't think just doing a job, every employee in a progressive company today is empowered to think and to do skill sets that involve continuous operational excellence, who actually can go home and tell their family what I do. It isn't just make a gadget or widget. It actually, it's involved with profit and loss in a company and having impact. And I think we've changed the model. Being old enough to say back when I took my first endeavor at this, it was somewhat, in some companies, you checked your brain at the door. But I think that model's gone away, and I think anyone coming out of any kind of academic environment needs to understand that you're a team player, a translator, and a person who is supposed to have impact with the company, not just get your paycheck.
I'll add one more thing to this, which is being in manufacturing. I never thought I was going to be a manufacturer. This is the first time I've ever actually made anything in my life. It requires humility. If I haven't worked a shift as a print operator, I become detached from how our current best practices are operating and what our software needs to be doing. The value of those people to me and me to them is absolutely critical. When we build a new product, we bring people off the floor that help us decide how to make it. So, go ahead.
I just have a comment, just because I've worked in manufacturing in North Carolina for 12 years. I never thought that I would be in manufacturing either. I worked with two of the largest North Carolina companies in manufacturing, one being Caterpillar and the other one being Cummins Engines. And I would highly recommend that anybody who's interested in manufacturing in North Carolina, you might want to go and visit one of these plants. Because that's the best way to learn about how anything is built, is to watch it built. And that's what I would say. Whether you're designing an engine part or a bolt or a process, or trying to make something safer, it's a good idea to see how it's done today. And if you haven't had an opportunity to do that, you should reach out to those companies, because they do tours all the time.
Absolutely. Go ahead.
Hi, yes. I'm president of SME, Society of Manufacturing Engineers here at NC State. We visited Cummins. We had a great time. It is a great opportunity. However, most of my members are pretty much non-American, or in addition are not from North Carolina and don't plan on doing manufacturing in North Carolina. How do we encourage incoming students and their parents that manufacturing is a good option for them?
That is absolutely an imperative for us to figure that very thing out, not just here at NC State University, but I would say across North Carolina, period. I'm sorry, Gard.
Go ahead.
Here's my passion coming out. In the Emerging Issues Forum, the actual 2-day event, that was probably all the working groups up to the point where we had the forum, and the 2 days of the forum, that point that you just made is probably the most critical point, and that is, how do we rebrand manufacturing as an important facet of our economy that needs to be considered an important facet, that needs to be considered a very viable career track for young people. And it's not just the young people, but all the people that influence those young people as they come along.
Can I ask you your own question? What do you think needs doing?
Most of the parents I talk to at open house are scared that manufacturing is still the old way. I think we need to reach out to students that are in high schools as well as their parents and show them what manufacturing is today. Most students do not know that, say, IE is focusing on regenerative medicine research and actually manufacturing regenerative medicine products. As well, other engineering disciplines are working, as we've talked about, with entrepreneurship program, which gives their students the ability to create their own ideas in engineering, which is something that parents want to see.
So, high schools?
High schools.
Talking to parents and showing pathways to entrepreneurship. Was there more?
Just getting involved in your community. Really,
okay.
We are NC State, we are the state, so let people know what we do.
You also touched on students who are coming here to college, and that's their first entry point, so you don't have a chance to capture them. or their attention or their parents' attention. In high school, we don't have their parents here at all. And so that compounds the problem for sure.
Yeah. It's a good question.
I'd just like to add to what was just pointed out about talking to parents. A couple of years ago, I had the opportunity to do some research with county high schools, not in Raleigh, it's actually in Chattanooga, Tennessee, but to ask them what were some barriers to students being interested in technical professions. And one of the messages that I got from the research was that the guidance counselors felt that there was a disconnect with what a technical profession was, and that the parents had a different view. They looked at it as the outmoded vocational type that wasn't a very high-paying job. So it echoes, I think, to a great extent what you just pointed out, and does present a challenge at the high school level for, as Terry pointed out, rebranding that manufacturing.
So we need to add guidance counselors to the list of people we're talking
Absolutely,
to.
as influencers.
Absolutely.
What you just said, the question was actually reminds me, I grew up in North Carolina, I grew up in Greensboro. And I went to high school, and I took physics in high school, and one day the textile crowd from NC State showed up. And had students and faculty taught a class in my physics class all about kind of the message we're talking about with manufacturing is how textiles was not what even in those days we thought textiles was, and how scientific it was, and how advanced it was. It has to do with making clothing that the military uses various. It was very interesting. In addition to the science little mini course they taught, so that ability to get in the classrooms with the guidance counselors, with teachers. You ask the average senior who's applied to colleges and sort of determined by then probably what they want to major in. Give me the names of the people, if you had to name a few, that impact your decision. You're probably going to hear in the top three parents, counselors, or a particular teacher. So if the parents are hard to capture and the guidance counselor is not usually on the tour of what colleges are doing to really explain the career possibilities for different disciplines, and the teachers are certainly not probably the freshest, unless they're young teachers in the field, and may not be from the field at all. Where is the messaging coming from? Those are where students are getting their influence.
Yeah, I would add one more thing that would do a lot to turn things around. If Mark Zuckerberg had been running a manufacturing business, or Steve Jobs had been running American manufacturing, there are a lot of things that just will focus attention when we have a few wins on the scoreboard of startups that have come out of, like, for example, General Electric reshoring its hot water heaters, or various things on Kickstarter, Apple Watch, things that are actually, they came out of nowhere, they got started by a young entrepreneur and have grown into a real business that's changing the world. I look at y'all to provide at least some of that. Go ahead.
Quick question about, to follow up with that, the public face of manufacturing. NASA has Neil deGrasse Tyson, science education has Bill Nye. Who does manufacturing have, or who do they need?
It's a good question. Anybody want to field that one? Well, I'm going to ask you back your own question. Who do we need?
I don't know, the whole thing, someone who debunks this sort of idea that you go to the factory, they punch the clock, all that sort of thing, but all that sort of stuff. But I think in the past manufacturing, we think about jobs in China and pollution and
Right.
I don't know, just gadgets and gizmos.
Yeah, one of my favorite YouTube videos is a plant that makes ink. And it's only 5 minutes long, and it's absolutely brilliant. And it really sets out the artisanship that goes into making ink. My second favorite video is where they made Crayola crayons. So that one's about 20 years old now. But yeah, something that takes you inside of the manufacturing process and turns it inside out.
It's curious, the popularity, the growing popularity of the shows like How It's Made, and I mean, I geek out over that. I mean, most of us who are in this business just are mesmerized by that, much sometimes to my irritation of my wife. But I think that there is a certain amount of curiosity on the part of the public and kids about how the objects that they interact with come to being. And you know, how do we convert that curiosity into a knowledge that there's a potential career path there that they can spring out of their own curiosity. And I mean, that stuff, when you really understand what goes behind this stuff, I think this is the thing I'm trying to impart to design students, but we can impart to all types of students. The amount of thoughtfulness, the degree of complexity, like you said, the artisanship that goes into the nuances that go into making this stuff work the way that it does. I mean, it's like watching a ballet, and it is mesmerizing to watch. Like the crayons being made, or the guy, you know, even hand making the Lamborghini to mass producing, you know, golf clubs. It all is just an amazing thing. So I don't know how you can, whether it's through SME or, you know, our professional organization IDSA, to try to get people bitten by the manufacturing bug, so to speak, because it is it's an amazingly satisfying thing to go out into a production floor and see these objects that you were intimately involved with the creation of. I mean, that's kind of what drove me. I was originally going to design from physics, and I did consider architecture briefly, but it wasn't fast enough for me. I didn't get the gratification that I can get from creating products that I can walk out on the shop floor and put my hands on. And so there is a magic to that, and I think a lot of it starts in advisors and promoting the industry more visually, really, to show them. It'd be great to do some kind of tack on to How It's Made or on YouTube to say, I'm interested in this. Because SME actually has a wonderful series of videos about how, and I use them a lot in my class. It'd be great to have some kind of connection to, if this really excites you, here are some of the best programs. Here's NC State's program of how you can do this yourself.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I think you bring up that I think is a really important point, and I'm sitting here thinking, okay, so I think that back in the day, I mean, Henry Ford was looked at as an icon. There have been automobile executives, automotive company executives. There have been airline manufacturing, Boeing. There have been executives that have sort of taken the front page and recaptured the attention and the interest. The Gilbrists back in their day were, you know, they were the kind of the people that cheaper by the dozen, because they had 12 children, but they applied the standards of efficiency and effectiveness in their family because they learned it out of working in industry. So there have been some icons, but I think it's an interesting question, and I'll tell you that the new Secretary of Commerce announced at the Emerging Issues Forum that kind of capturing this idea that you have, that she intends to appoint a Deputy Secretary of Manufacturing, and I think a lot of it is for that very reason, that you have to have somebody that wakes up every day and says, how do we make manufacturing exciting, at least in this state?
For my part, I'll just say it is exciting. And maybe that's where we should finish. I know we're just about out of time. How are we doing, Diane?
Right.
Okay.
Right on the
Maybe.
Well, actually, I think this is a perfect segue too, because it is exciting, and this moves us into our workshop, which we're going to talk exactly about this.
Rebranding manufacturing. So give up the floor. You had a quick comment.
Isn't Marshall Brain?
Oh, he is.
I mean, he's kind of that person already, isn't he? How stuff works. I mean, it's just maybe not as.
Yeah. No, I'm thinking about the father and son that chop up choppers in cable TV.
Sure.
They're definitely people who make stuff.
American Soccer is mesmerizing watching that water jet.
It's fantastic.
You can't help it.
You know,
If you've
put a
never
camera
seen
over
how
and have it shots.
toothpicks are made, how it made program is remarkable.
Yeah, I love it.
So,
My wife sits there and says, who engineered the equipment that's doing that to generate a toothpick?
There you
yeah.
go. Folks and I.
All right,
NC
well, let's make our segue. Thank you to my colleagues on the panel. And I think the next step. Is a workshop on that very topic.
Yeah, exactly. So this was a perfect segue on our topic, and really this is where we want student input. We want your ideas. We're going to break everybody out into a couple of groups on whiteboards. We're going to look to answer a couple of questions. One, how can students help rebrand manufacturing at NC State? How can we make it more interesting to our colleagues and our co-students, our friends and classmates? And what do we need to, what support do we need to make this happen? And I think maybe a last thing we should think about that Mark brought up, and that is, who is our manufacturing hero? So that Henry Ford that we're looking for, whether it's Marshall Brain or someone else, think about that in your groups as well. I think from our numbers, we have a good divide of 2 groups. Do we want to basically kind of pick one of these sides and then identify one person in the group who can write, be the writer, and help to collate the ideas? And then we're going to look to each of these groups for a couple of key ideas that will then enter into the emerging issues common. And the commons is another forum for continuing this conversation. So we'll kind of end the panel up here and move into our workshop from here on out. Do we have some folks that want to be in